In Revelation 13, we learn the Antichrist will be wounded as if it were to death. Interestingly, Zechariah offers where in the body the wound occurs and how we know today the potential medical implications. We also see how Daniel 2 and 7 matches the descriptions of the coming kingdom of darkness outlined in chapter 13. We then delve into the mark of the beast as offered by the false prophet, the branding of 666, the triumph of the 144,000, and the angelic harvesting by separating believers from non-believers. For the first time in world history, we witness an angel carrying out the assignment of evangelism to every tribe, nation, and tongue, plus two additional angels fulfilling their call to pronounce the declaration of Babylon and the condemnation from the wrath of God. Please consider joining us for this and so much more in the Harvesting Sickle, Revelation chapters 13 through 15. Hello, everybody. My name is Mark. You're watching or listening to the Russak Outlook. Thank you so much for joining. Today's topic is the Harvesting Sickle. This is Revelation chapters 13 through 15, part of an ongoing series where we're covering the entire book of Revelation. This is the fifth in a series. I believe will be 7 videos in the end. And why am I doing this? And really, it's because a lot of people either avoid or don't know or stay or haven't heard, or maybe it's not taught in your church. There's a variety of reasons, but people have not engaged with the book of Revelation. And this is what I believe is, the greatest love story ever told. And this is the closing chapter. So if you're reading a book or if you're listening to a book, you want to know what the end is like. And so for so many, it's a shame that you wouldn't know that. So that's really my heart. And Jesus says it right up front, blessed are those who read and understand this book. It's the only book in the Bible where he says that. So what I am looking to do as best I can, I believe in my heart that one of my primary gift is a teacher. So I'm going to break this down so that you can readily understand it, grasp it, run with it, and hopefully share this with others. Not only the video or the podcast, but what you've learned, and you can openly engage in conversation. So that's really it. Before I begin, whatever the platform you're on, YouTube, Rumble, all the podcast platforms, please hit the like and the subscribe button. Give us a rating on the podcast platforms, if you will, and ring the bell. It really, really helps us. I know we say this all the time, and you hear this with other channels and developers or others who share their content, but it really does, and my message is to get the gospel and to share the gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ. So that's why I ask you to do that. In particular, for those who don't know about Rumble, please go out there and subscribe to the channel. And really, there are times where we have to put a video there because of the content, but here I'm glad to hopefully, I'll be able to continue to share across all the different platforms. So that's really it. And last, if you wouldn't mind, go to the russackoutlook.com. You'll see a little prompt that comes up on the screen. Sign up for our email list. We notify you of new things. This is the 5th in a series of videos. We'd notify you when the 6th one is coming out shortly. And there's other things that we're going to be doing in the podcast realm and doing some different interviews in the fall. So we notify you about that. So please do that. Let's get into this. As I said, the Harvesting Sickle, Revelation chapters 13 through 15. And really, ultimately, you'll see as we get near the end of this presentation, this is really about separating believers from non-believers and the consequences of this. So as I do in all the videos, I just want to catch you up. If you go to video, I give you the breakdown of how this book is laid out, starting with the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus, which starts the church age. So the church age is covered in chapters 1 through 3. That was video 1. 4 and 5 is the rapture of the church. I will say right up front, we're going to touch on 2 different scriptures here that you won't hear concerning the rapture, well, I haven't heard in discussions where is the rapture pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib. And So I just wanted to pause. So for those who maybe you're curious about the timing of the rapture, there's two scriptures that we're going to touch on in regard to this here. But we did cover that in the second video. Then going back to video in the layout here, then the tribulation, which is 7 years, is covered in Revelation 6 through 18. We're covering 13 through 15, so we're in the second half of the tribulation here. Then chapter 19 is the second coming of Jesus on earth. 20 is the 1,000-year millennial reign, the lake of fire, the eventual white throne judgment, and then the eternity leading into a new heaven and a new earth. So I want to catch you up real quick. We left off in the earlier video. We covered the woes of God and the final trumpets of God, and this talked about the demons and that would be released from the abyss, the angels that are bound and released at the river Euphrates, and just literal hell on earth. But we closed with chapter 12, which is the sign as what's described. And I say that because I want to bring you up. I want you to remember that, because the first two chapters here, well, you'll see. I'll go to video. Let me do this. And chapter 12 was the woman, the child, and the dragon. And it was really an explanation of God's redemptive plan. In chapter 13, we're going to see here, we're going to be introduced to the Antichrist, or you'll see the beast. And he opposes this plan and what he's doing to oppose this plan. And some of the things I believe you see today, and I just highlighted a few things, the removal of absolutes. And I say that today for anybody who's listening, or maybe you're sitting on the fence and you're not sure. Just think about it. Anything is possible today, and you have this conglomeration of mixture of attitudes and cultures, and you see this so much in the transgenderism and sexuality and lawlessness, that up is down, down is up, blue is gray, and gray. It's a flipping. It's very obvious to me, and we'll talk about this in a couple of minutes, that it's the spirit of the Antichrist. And I'll break this down and I'll show you scripturally what I mean. Ultimately, this leads to a one-world government, where we'll cover this in the opening chapter 13. And really, this also, I'll show you on video, this is really going to be about a one-world economy with open borders and open markets. And again, this is something you see today. You see where the borders are being torn down. I'm in America, and the southern border is just an absolute calamity. And and the open markets and the internet and how that's done. And then chapter 14 is the proclamation of that plan. And interestingly, it's set in motion with three different angels, and predominantly the first one. And you'll see this is the first time in world history where we see an angel that is called to the ministry of and I don't, I say smiling, but evangelism. So, I'll show you that. So a breakdown of the chapters is this. Back to video. The beast, or the Antichrist, and the false prophet, we'll cover in chapter 13. In 14, in the beginning, what I talked about with the evangelistic outreach of the first angel. There's two other angels with global proclamations. We'll see the fulfillment of the parable of the tares in the second half of chapter 14, and then we'll get into the release of the seven bowls, and some singing and music in chapter 15 that I think is pretty cool. So, again, we're introducing you to the Antichrist, to the second part of Revelation, or second part of the tribulation, where he basically takes his mask off, so to speak, and shows his hand. The reason before we get into this, I want to show you, because everybody knows the term Antichrist, but interestingly enough, Antichrist never appears in the book of Revelation. The writer, John, refers to him as the beast, and we see this 28 times. John is the only New Testament writer, however, to use the term Antichrist, and he does so 4 times in 1 John and twice in 2 John. He's also called the man of lawlessness, or the son of perdition in 2 Thessalonians, the foolish shepherd, and I'm going to show that in a second on the screen here, and the king who exalts himself in Daniel. Daniel is the one I'm going to show you on the screen. I'm sorry. But I did want to show you in 1 John 2:18, if you're following me on video, it says this, "Little children, it is the last time, and as ye have many have heard that Antichrist shall come," notice capital A, "even now there are many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time." So that's what I was saying about the spirit of the Antichrist. And John makes a very clear distinction here that there is the Antichrist that will arrive on the scene in the 7-year tribulation. If you believe in the pre-trib rapture, we won't know who he is because we won't be here when that happens. And I would say some examples would be Stalin, Hitler. As a matter of fact, the Roman Emperor Nero, there are some in some, I believe, Protestant churches who believe that this has been fulfilled already, and that because Nero tortured and killed Christians by the thousands. He actually dipped them alive and in tar in some instances, and just torched them, and did so in his gardens, and would have people come and watch. So that would be a little Antichrist, if you will, or the spirit of Antichrist. I mentioned Stalin. Stalin killed 30 million Russians. There are so many examples, Hussein, Hitler, Idi Amin, who was the butcher of Uganda. And then the things that, like I've outlined earlier, of flipping law. He's known as the man of lawlessness, and how laws are being, usurped or turned over on its head. And I think if you saw some things in the Olympics recently, this past August, the opening ceremonies, it was a mockery of God. And I believe that would be a spirit of Antichrist, if you will. But I did want to show something that I believe is very, very important here. I'm going to go back to screen. Daniel 11, I know we're talking about Revelation, but we'll go back and forth a little bit with Daniel, because Daniel is probably the Old Testament equivalent, if you will, towards writing about the end times. And there's so many commonalities, if you will, that draw the book of Revelation and the book of Daniel as I would say almost a right glove and a left glove. And so in here it says this, "And the king shall do according to his will. He shall exalt himself, magnify himself above every god." Sounds like the Antichrist. "He shall speak marvelous, blasphemous things against the God of gods." So blasphemous, I want you to remember, because we're going to touch on that very quickly here. But the God of gods. Then if you go down to verse 37, it says, "Neither shall he be regarded the gods," plural. In the Hebrew, it is written as Elohim, which is the reference to the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So what is interesting here is it says, "Neither shall he regard the gods of his fathers." So if it's not regarding the gods of his fathers, could this potentially be pointing to that the Antichrist will be Jewish? I would say, that makes a very strong case. And I would fall into that grouping, if you will, of people who would believe. I can't say this for sure, but based upon what I see there. And then it also goes on to say, I'll go back to video, "Nor the desire of the women, nor regard of any god, for he shall magnify himself above all." So he won't have the desire of women, and he will not regard any god. This is all about him. This is all about the ego. This is all about Satan and him. If you go back to all of the Old Testament from the book of Genesis on, where he wants to exalt himself above God. So what I like to do here, as I've done in the past, I'm going to read the first half of Revelation, then we're going to break this down, then we'll go into the second half. Because there's a lot of things that, and again, we're going to be introduced here to the Antichrist or the beast and the false prophet. So at first I'm going to cover the Antichrist or the beast. Second half we're going to cover the false prophet. So Satan, I should say, is the dragon. We talked about the dragon earlier with chapter 12, and he introduces the two prominent figures, which is the beast or Antichrist. He will be a political, global, economic leader. He will be the dictator of the eventual one world government, and the false prophet will be the propagator or the leader of what I would say would be the one world religion, which will be ultimately a call to fall and to worship Satan. So it says this, and I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Again, remember that blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard. His feet were that of a bear, and his mouth was that of a lion. And the dragon, Satan, gave him his power, his seat, and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered or marveled after the beast. They worshipped the dragon, which gave power to the beast. They worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, to overcome them. Power was given him of all kindreds and tongues and nations. And all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book in the book of the life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man has an ear, let him hear. He that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So there's a lot to unpack here. So if you can, if you're following me on podcast, I'll break this down, but I put a lot of notes into it on video. So I'm going to start with this. And as I stood upon the sand of the sea, whenever we're talking about the sea here, I believe I've mentioned this earlier, talking about the sea of humanity, not a literal ocean. I saw a beast, again, the Antichrist, rise up out of the sea. So he's coming out of the sea of humanity. He's coming out of the world. He will have a world background, which I would say pretty much, if you look at the signs, I would say that my belief is that the Antichrist is on the earth today. If, in fact, we're looking at 10, 20, 30 years from now, we don't know. But I would say that the Antichrist, since we know he's going to come from amongst the people, he's going to be a man, we also know that he's probably on the earth today. And he has 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his 10 crowns, and upon his name the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was on this is important, and we're going to break this down with the heads and the horns and the crowns, was like to a leopard. We're going to see this in Daniel 7. I'm going to go to that in a second. His feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth was the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. So I'm going to stop there for a second. This will be something that I really feel like I need to do, because I want to break down this piece about the beast, the head, the horns, the crowns, and some of the symbolism, because I'm going to swing back to Daniel 7, and we're going to also cover this because it culminates in the next video. It culminates in chapter, we'll see it in chapter 17. So back to video here. Again, I give you an artist's rendition of it, but just to get, obviously I don't think it looks like this, but just to give you that analogy. So the beast has 7 heads and 10 horns and 10 crowns, and you see that. And, we're talking about, if I go back to here, we're talking about 4 beasts, because there's the beast with the leopard, the bear, and the lion. That's why I just want you to remember that. So these point to past empires, and I'm going to show you this in the book of Daniel, and with proof of that. There are six major world empires. Started with Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greek, and Roman. When the book of Daniel is written, what he's doing is he's interpreting the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and also he himself has a dream similar, but it points to four major empires: the Babylonian, which he is presently in as he's writing this with King Nebuchadnezzar, but it also points to some of the attributes of what will be future empires, which turns out to be the Medo-Persians, the Greek, and the Roman. And the seventh world empire will be that eventual, what I would call Roman Empire 2.0 or 2.1, which would be the beast, that final world empire. So I'm going to go back to video here, and I show you the empires on the top. But I wanted to give you some definitions of 10, because that is the totality of human military and political power that assisting the beast. The horns indicate power, as in the animal kingdom. Picture horns on an animal, a wildebeest or something like that. He uses it offensively to attack and defensively for protection. And then the crowns indicate the dominion of the Confederate kingdom. So this is really pointing to kings that will assist and will partake and join with the beast. The beast will be the leader of this confederacy of nations. But I did want to remind you of Revelation 12 on the bottom. There appeared another wonder in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns upon his heads. So that whole piece there goes back to this. Then we will see this in the next video, but I did want to point out in Revelation 17, and the 10 horns which thou saw are 10 kings. So we know what the horns are, and the crowns are the crowns that these kings, this power, this authority, that the dominion that they have. So there's a little bit of background for that. I have to cover this in Daniel because it basically validates this. So Daniel was written probably about 600 years prior to I take that back. Yeah. I guess that would be about 600 years prior to John's writing on the island of Patmos. So this is where Daniel has a dream of these 4 beasts that we're talking about 600 years later in this dream. So in the first year of Belshazzar, the king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions passed through his mind as he was lying in bed. Jump down to verse 4 in the yellow highlight. The first was like a lion. It had 2 wings of an eagle, and I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that it stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. Interesting. Verse 5 in green. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It was raised up on one side. It had 3 ribs in its mouth and its teeth, and it was told to get up and eat your fill of flesh. 6, blue highlight. After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard, and on its back it had 4 wings like that of those of a bird. This beast had 4 heads and was given authority to rule. Then the 7th verse. After that, in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth, crushed and devoured its victims, trampled underfoot whatever was left. It was different from the former beast. It had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up from among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like that of a human being and a mouth that spoke boastfully. So, there you have. I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I just want to go to where I show you in Revelation 17, it says, and the 10 horns which saw 10 kings which received not their kingdom. So they're about to engage with this. But again, the analogy between what Daniel saw and what John saw is pretty obvious. Then he gets the interpretation of this dream on the right-hand side on video. So yellow to yellow. So he told me, he gave me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kings that will rise from the earth. Then orange highlight, then I wanted to know the meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from the others and most terrifying with its iron teeth and bronze claws. The beast that crushed and devoured his victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. So he's talking about this same beast that John is referring to now in the end of days. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up before, which 3 of them fell off, the horn that looked more imposing than the others and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Again, that blasphemy, that boastfulness. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the holy people and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. So this is the Antichrist subduing the 3. He will speak against the Most High, oppress his holy people, and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. That's the 3.5 years. The second half of tribulation, but the court will sit and his power will be taken away and be completely destroyed forever. So fast forward to the end of Satan and his realm. But, I guess it's pretty obvious that Daniel is writing about the same as John sees in Revelation. So I wanted to draw this, but I also wanted to show you the dream that I'll go back to Daniel 2 for a second, for Nebuchadnezzar's vision of these 4 beasts. This is where Nebuchadnezzar has the dream. Nobody can interpret it in his court, and he calls Daniel, and Daniel interprets the dream. And he does this, and matter of fact, do I have this? This is, I'll go to a visual prop. So this is the vision that he sees, the head of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. So thank you for that. Just happened to remember that was there. And you'll see this on video. I'll go back to video on the left-hand side. So the body of a lion and the wings of an eagle, Daniel 7:4, represents the Babylonian Empire. So in the blue on the right, a lion from the thickets of the Jordan, as outlined in Jeremiah, because as lions fled from the thickets and attacked nearby villages along the Jordan, where it overflowed its banks, so the Babylonian general had spread out beyond immediate region to attack surrounding countries. His army was renowned for speed, causing Ezekiel to describe him as the wings of an eagle. The sculpted image of wings with a lion is very present throughout Babylon. So when they uncover many of the ancient artifacts and archaeological excavations in that Babylonian area, which is in the area of Iraq, you see, and they have this, where carvings or sculptures of lions with wings. The bear was considered a fearful creature. 1 Samuel, Hosea, Amos, which represented Medo-Persia. This was considered a fierce foe. Isaiah backed this up. It lacked the unified strength of its predecessor. Now remember, this is before this empire came into existence. Just as a bear moves slower than a lion, though larger than the Babylonian Empire, they too moved slower in their war campaigns. The one side being higher to the other refers to the Persian influence moving in prominence and power. The 3 ribs most likely refers to their 3 great conquests, which was Babylon, Egypt, and Lydia. Then I go into the leopard with the 4 heads. That's one of the fastest animals on earth. Alludes to the speed of the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire just decimated the Medo-Persians and others and expanded its empire at great speed. And then 4th, I'm going to jump down back to video again. This is where there's 3 stages of this, which is the original Roman Empire, the Roman Empire that will come, and then where it says then the beast pops up and 3 horns are removed. So that's the 3 stages: the original, the 10 horns, and then the one that comes up and removes the 3, and that's the prominence of the beast or the Antichrist. So the beast was a monster that was dreadful, terrifying, and extremely strong. Large iron teeth that devoured and feet and crushed and trampled down. The iron teeth parallel the legs and the feet of iron in the statue. Daniel focuses on the 10 horns and the little horn that rose to dominate the other 3. That's the 3rd stage, which represents 10 kingdoms. The little horn rises with eyes like that of a man and an idiom of human personality and intelligence. I back that up with Ezekiel and Zechariah. A mouth uttering great boasts, euphemisms for arrogant and boastful things, as Daniel later reveals, basically saying, speaking against God. So you had the dream of Nebuchadnezzar that Daniel interpreted, 4 great empires, the one he was in at the time, and he describes 3 more that will come, and we know what those 3 empires, history bore this out. So again, just alluding to how, the Lord says, I know the end from the beginning. He foretells things that are to happen. And this just validates the validity of the scriptures, of the Word of God. This is written, 600-700 years, 500 years before little more than 500 years before the Roman Empire. So I just say this because I needed to draw the analogy of Daniel and John in Revelation, but pointing to how they're all seeing the same things, the same beasts, the same representations, except the acceleration of this final empire dwarfs what was at the time of the original Roman Empire. So now, and I did want to say one thing. I'm going to go back to my friend the statue here for a second. He does talk about, this is the Nebuchadnezzar dream, the 2 legs of iron and the 10 toes. So the 10 toes to me would be that 10 kings that he sees. This is Nebuchadnezzar's dream. But they're made of iron and miry clay. In other words, they can't hold with one another. You can't take iron and clay and mix it and have it form. So it although it's strong with iron, it can't sustain itself. I believe that's what we're seeing today. My own personal opinion, I believe the 2 legs represents the East and the West. The formation of what we're seeing, I think it's pretty obvious in the world as we see the West, and you can kind of almost draw this analogy with, let's put this back, what we see in Ukraine, where the Western nations are on one side and the Eastern nations, although it's Russia, you also have North Korea involved, Iran, China. So I think that's where you'll see the conglomeration of nations represented there. It's my own personal opinion. But I did want to point to how they will not be able to stay together. And really it makes sense because, not only will you have the division amongst the different nations and the kings and the crowns, but also East and West. So I think that just kind of backs it up. So I have to go back to this. So there was a lot to cover, and I realized I had to go to Daniel, and this is about the book of Revelation, but I believe it substantiates all of what John is writing, and history bore this out as well. So verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and this deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered and marveled after the beast. So I do have to cut to one thing here because as I was studying this out, this is the first time I saw this, I believe this is laid out in Zechariah 11, 15, 17, where it says this, and the Lord said to me, take unto thee the instruments of the foolish or the wicked shepherd, another name for Antichrist. For lo, I will raise up a shepherd in the land, which shall not visit those that be cut off, shall neither seek the young one, nor heal that is broken, nor feed that stands still. But he shall eat the flesh of the fat and tear the claws in pieces. Very similar description of what we just read in Daniel. And woe to the idle shepherd or the worthless shepherd that feeds the flock. The sword shall be upon his arm and upon his right eye, and his arm shall be clean dried up, and his right eye shall be utterly darkened. So let me go back real quick. So it says this, verse 3, and I saw one of his heads as if it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed. So there's a miraculous healing that will take place. It says like to death. Some people will say he was killed. He's not killed. It has the appearance of death, and then he will have the appearance of resurrection, where really this is what Satan does. He mimics and he mocks and he deceives. So what I find interesting here is I believe the wound will be in the eye. So whether that's a sword, a bullet, or a blunt instrument, or whatever it is, I don't know, but I believe that it will happen there. And if I go back to video for a second, and it says his right eye and his arm shall be clean dried up, and his eye shall be utterly darkened. So he will be blinded. But what I find very interesting here is, if medically we know this, if the right eye is severely injured or blinded, it impacts the arm, the opposite arms. A lot of times, too, one thing happens on the brain, one side, and impacts the other. And we know that the arm, I guess, would be almost paralyzed or unable to be used. So it's interesting to me that I think what will eventually will happen is the injury will go to the eye, and his left arm would be useless, or powerless, if you will. And so let's continue to go on here. And they worship the dragon, which gave power to the beast, and they worship the beast, again, because they think he's been resurrected. Verse 5, and there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given to him to continue 42 months. That's the second half of the tribulation. He opened his mouth in blasphemy against God. And you constantly see these words, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to, this is important, this goes back to what I was alluding to in the beginning about the rapture, and to overcome them, and power was given to him to all kindreds, tongues, and nations. If I go back to the words of Jesus, Jesus says, the gates of hell shall not prevail against his church. Here it says he will overcome the Christians. So to me, if he's over, that's either a contradiction in terms, and Jesus, it's not a lie. Jesus cannot lie. So I believe that this is pointing to the fact that the church is not present. There are Christians on the earth. People are getting saved. People are coming to the Lord at great price, many of them being killed and beheaded and martyred. But it says Satan will overcome them in the second half of tribulation. And I say, why? Because the power, the presence of Holy Spirit with the church is not there. And it goes on to say, and they that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundations of the world. I emphasize this because I did a video, and I would encourage you in a podcast. It's Before Time Began, or The Beginning of Time, I think it says on YouTube, or vice versa. But I found this, I did this, 4, 5, 6 months ago, and I was amazed because he's saying before the foundations of the world, there was the Lamb. And the scriptures are very clear that you listening, you watching, the church, everybody, every person, you were in mind before the world was created, before Satan or Lucifer was created. And I give you all the backings in that video. So, if you're curious, and it just goes to how very special you are in the eyes of the Lord. And it concludes with, he that leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He that kills with the sword must be killed. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. So we're going to go into the second half of this chapter. And again, I'm going to read what it is. We're going to be introduced to now the false prophet. And I beheld, Another beast coming up out of the earth. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke as a dragon. He exercises all the power of the first beast before him, causes the earth and them that dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. We just read about that. And he does great wonders, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of these miracles, which he has power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, they should make an image of the beast, which had the wound by a sword. Actually, I said we're not sure how it goes. It's by a sword. So there you go. So I believe that will point to the fact that unless there's some other instrument for the name of sword, it looks like he will be injured in his eye by a sword. And he lives. And he had the power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many not to as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their hand or on their foreheads. So, people are concerned about this all over the world today. And that no man would buy or sell, save that he has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Hear his wisdom. Let him that understand count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666, which is the infamous 666. So let's break this down. And behold, I behold another. The Greek word here is allos, which means another of the same kind. So another of the same kind, coming from the dragon. Comes up out of the earth, which I would say is controlled by a demon out of the abyss. And he had two horns like a lamb. So two horns, he's inferior to the beast, like a lamb. So he appears gentle and deceptively attractive, which is the religious connotation, I would say, of the one world religion. And he spoke as a dragon. And he exercises all the power of the first beast before him. Again, this is the purpose of this, is the one world religion, to point people away from God and onto the Antichrist. He causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he does great wonders, or another word in another translation is signs, so that he makes fire come down from heaven and on the earth in the sight of men. Counterfeit signs. We talked about this with the two witnesses. We know this with Elijah. So he's mimicking, he's deceiving. And then verse 14, he deceives them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had the power to do in their sight, saying unto them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had by the sword and did live. And he had power to give life in the image of the beast, that the image of the beast both speaks and causes them that would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So this leads to the abomination of desolation. So I wanted to pause here, and let me do this. So what is the abomination of desolation? Let me go to what Matthew says, Matthew's gospel of translating what Jesus says about the book of Daniel. So here, go back to Matthew 24. Where you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place. Let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. Let them which is on the housetop come down. Don't take anything out of the house, neither let them which is in the field return back. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray that your flight not be in winter, neither on the Sabbath, for there shall be great tribulation, such as what was not as the beginning of the world this time, nor shall ever be. So this is where Satan goes into the temple, and he demands to be worshipped, or his image is there, and the image is fostered, if you will, by the false prophet. This is the second half of what we're talking about, leading to this abomination of desolations. But I wanted to point to this scripture as another backing to the tribulation, and you rarely hear this, and I've not heard it, in a rapture sense. So go back to video. This is Daniel is given a translation of the times for the Jews, by the angel Gabriel. And it says this: 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city, to finish the transgression, to make an end of sins, to make reconciliation for iniquity, to bring everlasting righteousness, to seal up the vision and the prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks. So again, we're talking about 70 weeks of years, and it's broken up into 7 weeks of years, 62 weeks of years, and a final week of years. The 7 weeks of years is from the decree to build Jerusalem till Jesus enters into the city riding on a donkey or a mule or a colt. That's 49 years. Then from that point, leading up until the end, you have another 434 years. So you've gone from the building of Jerusalem right up until what will be the end. Here, let me go back to video here. 7 weeks, the 40 are the 49 years. The 62 weeks are the 434 years. So this is the time of the Jews. So right up until leading up unto Jesus at the crucifixion, which starts the church age, that equals 49 plus 434, which is 483 years. This is the time of the Jews. Then Jesus enters, right? This is the crucifixion and the resurrection, the beginning of the church age. Then there's that 1 week of years, which is the tribulation, which the church is not present, because this is the time of the Jews. This is the time of the fulfillment. I mean, it's for Gentiles and Jews, but my point here is this was a very clear decree from the angel that there is a segment of time that's been determined for your people, the Jews. The decree to go from, leave Babylon and rebuild the temple, 7 years. From that point on until the arrival of Jesus and the eventual crucifixion and resurrection, 434 years. So all the times of the Jews before the church age, before Christ's sacrifice, 483 years, that totals. Then there's that last 7 years, which is the 7-year tribulation. Here's my point. It's the time of the Jews. The church is not present. And again, so this to me is clear that the rapture of the church has already happened, because this last 7 years does not include the church. So I think, and I think it's pretty clear, hopefully my point was made, that is what's pointing to. So let me go back to the conclusion here in 666 and some of the meanings that we can take out of this. Verse 16, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell save he that has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let he that has understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number shall be 666. So there's been so much debate about 666. Bottom line, we don't know. I will tell you that 6 is the number of man. Man was created on the 6th day. Could it be a representation of the beast, the false prophet, and the Antichrist, or Satan, the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet? 666. We don't know. People have been trying to point to it. I would say the technology is here today. I'll just show you some things on video. You think of a barcode, you think of a chip, you think of things that are planted in you. There are nanobots that are planted in you now. So there's a number of ways that this mark can be put on you. We don't know how it will be, and I'll just show you this too. Just think about all the different symbols that people take to themselves. I show you in the top, in the middle, there's a chip. That's one of the men in Europe who is implanting chips into people's skin. He's already done this, I believe, a few times now. forehead and the right hand. I show you an example of going through the airports or, into law buildings or court proceedings where you have to go through and be scanned. So there's a variety of ways of technology can be used. And then I show you all the different tattoos and symbolisms. There's going to be so many different ways that you can identify yourself as with the Antichrist. But my point here is, and you'll see this at the end, once you take this mark, deal's off. You're sealed forever. You're doomed to eternity. And you will. You'll have to take it because he says you cannot buy, sell, or trade. So Christians will die because, they'll die of malnutrition or starvation because they will not be able to buy, sell, or trade. And that's the carrot that the enemy will point to. Like, you want to eat, you want to sustain your life, you want to feed your family. So imagine a parent whose children may be malnourished or something. There'll be so many different temptations to take it. And how that mark appears, again, it'll be on the wrist and the forehead, whether it's visible or invisible. You get scanned, we don't know. But my point is there's so many different ways of displaying who you stand with today, who you align with. I think tattoos are probably the greatest example because many people would align with a certain organization. I showed you the example of gangs. You have to have certain tattoos to align yourself with a certain gang, and so forth and so on. So, all of that to say that's Revelation chapter 13. There was a lot to unpack there, but I needed to get into it. I needed to break down Daniel. We'll go a little bit quicker in these final two chapters. Chapter 14 serves as a preview. So, where I said earlier, it's not necessarily always sequential. There are some chapters that are sequential, and then there's this whole Eastern mindset where it's more circular. So we're going to take another. We've seen what's happening on the earth. We see the introduction to the Antichrist, the second half of the tribulation, to the false prophet, all the things and the tools that they will use to deceive you. But chapter 14 now serves as a preview from heaven's perspective. We will see the triumph of the 144,000. We've covered this before, which represents the 12 tribes of Israel. The fall of Babylon, which is the symbolic of Satan's world system and the fate of those that are loyal to him. And there will be a summary glimpse of the eventual leading up to what we know as the Battle of Armageddon, which is really describing the winepress of the wrath of God. So chapter 14 is broken down to three sections or parts. And here, I'll show you this on video. Verse 1, then I looked, Jesus returned and the 144,000. Then I saw God uses three angels to proclaim the gospel and to judge the world. Then I looked, there's three more angels to harvest the world by separating believers from non-believers. So what I think before I read, which is important, I wanted to remind you, keep this in mind before I read chapter 14, what Jesus said, because I personally found this fascinating. Then Jesus sent the multitude away and went to the house, and his disciples came to him saying, declare unto us the parable of the tares of the field. So in other words, they have a hard time understanding it. And this is how Jesus answered them. He that sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world. The good seed are the children of the kingdom, but the tares are the children of the wicked one. The enemy that sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the reapers are the angels. And I emphasize you remember that because you're going to see that play out very shortly in chapter 14. As therefore the tares are gathered and burned in the fire, so shall be the end of this world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels. They shall gather out his kingdom all things that offend and them which do iniquity. And they shall cast them into the furnace of fire. They shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. Then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who has ears to hear, let him hear. I wanted to emphasize that because you will see, I believe, in this chapter, the fulfillment of what Jesus was talking about a couple of thousand years ago, or, he wrote this 60 years before the book of Revelation was written. So, chapter 14, and looked, and lo, I'm sorry. And I looked, and lo, a lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, 12 tribes of Israel, having his father's name written in their foreheads. So again, if you are with the world and you've taken the world's mark, it's either the forehead or the hand, or the forehead, the hand. The 144,000 have a different marking on their foreheads, whether that's visible. I remember, side note, in the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye, which I highly recommend. It's just a wonderful series. But it was only the Christians that could see the mark. That the world, if the way, and it's how Tim LaHaye wrote it out. Maybe that will happen. I don't know, but I just thought that was interesting because only they could recognize each other. And I heard a voice from heaven and the voice of many waters. Remember, we heard the voice of God before with many waters, as great thunder. And I heard the voice of harpists playing their harps. And they sung a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders. No man could learn that song, but only the 144,000 that were redeemed from the earth. These are they which were not defiled with women. They are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. In their mouth was found no guile, for they were without fault before the throne of God. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of the heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell upon the earth, to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, Fear God, give him glory, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And there followed another angel, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And the third angel followed with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast in his image, and receives the mark in his forehead or his hand, they shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without the mixture into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, for they have no rest day or night. They who worship the beast in his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. So again, the distinction. So if you received that 666 mark that was just outlaid in chapter 13, that's really what he's alluding to. So let me break this down, show you again on video. And lo, a lamb stood. And what I just wanted to reference back to, this is the most referenced name that Jesus uses, what I would say his favorite name. He wants to be known as the Lamb of God. And remember, John the Baptist, behold, the Lamb of God is coming. And I think I've said this before, the only human markings in heaven today are the holes in Jesus' hand, the marks of his crucifixion. So he stood on Mount Zion, which is a reference to Jerusalem. With him were the 144,000. Those were the 12 tribes of Israel, sealed in Revelation 7. They have the Father's name written on their foreheads. Where I heard a voice of many waters and music playing, and now this is all playing out in heaven. And they sung a new song before the throne, and before the four beasts and the elders. So this is again the magnificence and the splendor of heaven, and the presence of the 144,000. They're singing a new song that's not been heard in heaven before, and no one else could learn but these 144,000. And these are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Whether this is figurative or literal, we don't know. I'm not going to, break that down, but there are some, I would say, that believe a lot of these would be what we would refer to as the Orthodox Jews today, where you see, with the hats and the curls, if you will, and where they have dedicated their lives to the Lord. I don't know. I tend to think that this may be more figurative than literal, but I'm sure a case can be made for both. But they were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. So these are the first fruits from Israel that is given to the Lamb, this 144,000. If you know about first gifts, first offerings, the tithe, the tenth, the very first, the beginning. Their mouth was filled with no guile or deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. There is no fault because they are covered in the blood of Jesus. They have been redeemed. So they stand before these 144,000 Messianic Jews. And then it goes on. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach them which dwell on earth, to every nation, kindred, and tongue. First time in world history, an angel is preaching the gospel to every nation, tribe, and tongue. So how that translates into, are they all hearing in their own language? I would imagine so. I don't know. I would think that I personally, if I'm thinking about this, would be the voices of the angels would be heard in the heavens. There are examples around the world where strange noises are heard in the heavens, and some would account it to song, some would account it to trumpet blasts, and that potentially angelic indicators, spiritual warfare. We don't know, but So when the gospel, when it says in the Word of God that every man shall hear the gospel, here is your final indicator that he's sending an angel out. And I would say another indication, the church is not prevalent. Christians are there, they're helping one another, but this is, again, the mercy of God being poured out. He's doing everything that he believes is righteous and able to give people a chance to come to the Lord. And then followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen. Again, Babylon, the second most mentioned city. It is Satan's capital, if you will. That great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, which is basically spiritual prostitution, engaging in the Antichrist false system. Then a third angel follows, and he says, if any man worship the beast and receives his mark, basically, this is your final seal. You've done it. You are now sentenced to a life of fire and brimstone for all of eternity. I cannot emphasize this enough. I've said this before. Jesus preaches more on hell than he does on heaven. And I'm paraphrasing where he says, what is it that a man would lose his life, but more important that he not lose his soul? I'm paraphrasing the scripture. But knowing what's before you, hell, the eventual lake of fire was created for the fallen angels. It was not created for man. But if you deny Christ, Christ says, I will deny you before my Father and the angels. So these three angels are basically the invitation to the gospel, the declaration that Babylon has fallen, and the condemnation for those who do not, or for those who took the mark of the beast. Second half of chapter 14. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. I heard a voice from heaven saying unto me, Blessed are the dead which die in the Lord, therefore, yea, saith the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors, and their works do follow them. And I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the white cloud sat one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is there to reap, and the harvest of the earth is ripe. And he that sat on the cloud thrust his sickle on the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple in heaven, saying, he is in heaven with a sharp sickle. And then a third, or another angel came out from the altar, which had the power over fire, and cried with a loud cry to him that had the sharp sickle, to the second angel, saying, Thrust in the sharp sickle, gather the clusters of the vines of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the angel thrust in the sickle, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it to the great winepress of the wrath of God. And the winepress was trodden without the city, and blood came out of the winepress, even unto the horse bridles by the space of 1,600 furlongs, which is basically equivalent to 180 miles of blood. So let's break this down. So we know that Jesus is the harvester of souls because he sits on the white cloud. that we behold. And behold, a white cloud upon him was like the Son of Man, the Messiah. So the white cloud signifies purity. He wears a golden crown. So that's the crown of victory. And he has the sharp sickle. He's carrying the sickle, so he has the authority. And then these following three angels, the 4, 5, and 6, if you will, they announce the announcement of the harvest. They are deployed with a sharp sickle and the judgment of the unbelievers to that final angel. I did want to point out on video here that if you look where it says 3 on the bottom, verse 18, this is the angel which comes out from the altar. This angel is associated with fire, representing the prayers of the saints. I go back to Revelation 6 and 8. This refers to the constant burning fire on the brass altar of the Jerusalem temple. Twice daily, the priest would burn incense in the most holy place as a symbol of the people's prayers. This angel is coming from the heavenly altar to ensure that the prayers of all the saints for judgment and the coming of the kingdom are answered. He calls for judgment to begin. So this is now the announcement that judgment is about to start. So, this is, again, where we've gone from the introduction of the Antichrist and makes himself known, the abomination of desolation, where he declares himself God in the temple of God and the false prophet. And then you have this switch back to the scene in heaven where you have the three declarations. Then you have the three angels engaged in the harvest with Jesus. Jesus is the one, because remember, it says this: the angel came out of the temple crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud. He's crying to Jesus, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So that's where Jesus comes in and takes his people, if you will. We're winding this down. 15 is relatively quick, but I did want to show you, if I go down to verse 20 here at the bottom, the winepress was trodden, and the horse, so there's blood up to the horse's bridle. And we don't really know like that. I mean, you picture a horse and blood that deep. And again, it says, 600 furlong, another numeric translation is stadia, again, which equals approximately 180 miles. And you go, what do you mean 180 miles? And it looks like it stops just before Jerusalem. It's almost like God does not want this blood to enter into the city. If you look at where it starts in the valley of Megiddo, this is about Armageddon. This is about that final battle that we'll learn about in the coming the final video. But I wanted to just give you a couple of images. I was fortunate enough to be in this location several years ago. But this is some of the different pictures and view angles. That one on the lower right is where I was looking over these valleys. And, you can imagine nations from all over the world with the size of this valley that can engage in this war. In the upper right, it shows you that's the Jezreel Valley, and then where Mount Tabor is, lower in the Galilee region. So my point here is that this was written thousands of years ago, and if we think about this geographical location today, you can see it's big enough that you will see nations gathering. And, some will be with the Antichrist and some will be fighting him. Remember, not all the nations will engage. And ultimately, Jesus comes down as the victor in Jerusalem. But I guess my point that I look at is how did 2,000 years ago, when John's writing this, that he writes about this valley, he would have known about it. He would have been in the Galilee region with Jesus. He probably visited this area. But to say all the nations, and I just find it interesting. Okay, so winding down, chapter 15. This is the shortest of the three, and I saw here. Let me just let me read it first. I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the last 7 plagues, for in them is filled the wrath of God. And I saw as if it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast and over his image, over his mark, and over the number of his name, 666, standing on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. They sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb, saying, Great and marvelous are thy works, Lord God Almighty, just and true are your ways, thou King of saints. Who shall not fear thee, O Lord, and glorify your name? For thou only art holy. For all nations shall come and worship before thee, for the judgments are made manifest. And after that I saw, and behold, the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. And the 7 angels came out of the temple, having 7 plagues, clothed in pure white linen, and having their beasts girded with golden girdles. And one of the 4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials full of the wrath of God, or bowls, who lives forever and ever. And the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God, from his power. No man was able to enter the temple until the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were fulfilled. So this is where, again, I said in the very beginning, we have the 7 seals of God, the 7 trumpets of God. Now this, and we'll see this in the next video, the release of these 7 bowls, which is the ultimate wrath of God that will come down. So just real quickly, what I found interesting here is they sing the song of Moses. So this song was sung by Israel immediately after their passage through the Red Sea and their deliverance from the Egyptian armies. Something I wrote on the right here. This was a song of victories and deliverance that the redeemed who overcame Antichrist and his system will readily identify with. So the Song of Moses was sung on earth when the Lord parted the sea and put the Egyptians ultimately to their death in their chariots. And that's when they sang that song of deliverance. Now they're singing the song of deliverance for a different reason, because it is God who has redeemed them from the beast and his antichrist system, if you will. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is in the green highlight, great and marvelous are your works. And I say that because your salvation is not depicted upon or not conditional upon your works, but your works will be rewarded. You know, there will be the bema, the judgment seat of God, where you will be given crowns of victories depending upon different areas. I'm not going to get into that now, but my point here is the good things that you do on earth will be rewarded. It has nothing to do with your salvation. You cannot earn your salvation, but great and marvelous are thy works, and just and true are your ways, the ways of God, the works of God. And then finally it says, glorify thy name, for thou art holy, which is the worth of God. So you have the works of God, the ways of God, and the worth or the holiness of God. And it concludes with that one of the 7 beasts. And, you know, I show you here on the bottom, could be their artist indicator that this is the one with the lion's head. We don't know. But he issues out 7 more angels to receive the 7 bowls, and then we'll see what they are in the next video. Chapter 16 lays that out, and that's what we'll get into, that final stage of tribulation. So leading up to what we will see in the coming video, the 7 bowls, the fulfillment of God's word. We will get into chapter 17, which is the mystery, which is the woman, the beast. We're going to get into the 7 heads and the 10 horns and their demise. And I find this is something that stuck with me. Here, I'm saying this, and let me point to a video here. The lower right, where it says in I believe it's chapter 18, Babylon is fallen, come out of her, my people. Or maybe it's 17, I'm not sure. But I just find that a message for today. And the reason I say that is because of all the things that we're seeing in the world today, and the push for evil and the spiritual wickedness that's happening and the battle in the heavens. I believe one of the things the Lord is saying to the church, this is just my own, is come out of her, my people. In other words, do not, I'm saying this for myself, do not compromise. Do not fall into the world system. Do not say, oh, I can just do this, or I can just do that, or I can look this way, or I can look that way, I can say this, or come out from her, be holy. That's just something I feel like the Lord is speaking to me personally and to the church. And And so that's what we'll. So this is what we will see in the next, which will be the 6th video. And that's it. And then I just wanted to say, thank you all for listening. I appreciate it as always. I find this very exciting as we're going through this. We're now through 5 videos, 2 more to go. And any questions, please, by all means, russackoutlook@gmail.com. Please email me questions, comments, prayer requests. Happy to take them. You've been listening to the Russak Outlook. And remember, as always, just my opinion.